Hey, all right. This is Darren Gross. We're going to do a quick slide share on topic of apartment fires. We're going to take a look at the causes, the cost, the time lost, and what can be done about them. And there's a couple of components to this. We did a survey. We also did. We'll pose a question. We did a survey. We checked with the Portland Fire and Rescue for data, as well as the National Fire Protection Association for data. And like I said, we're going to take a look and see what apartment owners can do to minimize their risk, and also if there's any benefit to what they can do. So the basic question that I wanted to start with, or the premise, is that everybody who buys insurance understands this, that the premium they pay is directly related to the claims experience they've had in the recent past. And there's two things insurance companies look at for determining the size of risk that you are, or the potential risk. That is the claim frequency that you've suffered in the recent past, as well as the severity of claims. So if you're somebody who's had repeated small claims, you're probably considered even a higher or less desirable risk than somebody who's had very few claims, but a major claim. And it's estimated that the majority of all non-weather claims in apartments are caused by tenants. So those are the two kind of the points, the starting points for this exercise. Now, the question that I'm posing to you, and the question I posed and was trying to determine if there was something that we could do, is what is the cost? What would the cost be to transfer 100% of these claims that are caused by tenants, if we could transfer those away from the landlord's insurance policy? And then also, if we were to do that, what would the benefit be to the landlord? So I started with just a little perception survey because my experience in 20 plus years of being an insurance agent, I've seen a number of claims, and especially with rentals, whether it be cooking fire or smoking or actual arson, just a variety. I mean, you name it, it's happened. And so I thought a good place to start would be just to ask people that I know in real estate, and those people I know that have some sort of affinity for property, what their perception was as far as what's the number one cause for apartment fires. And there's a picture of James Dean smoking a cigarette. I think this is from the movie Giant, if I remember. Somebody might be able to correct me on that. But anyway, smoking was definitely portrayed as a cool thing back in the movies. And so anyway, the 5 questions that I posed for possible sources, the 5 number one sources that I thought, or 5 sources that I thought the audience or the people surveyed could determine, or I wanted their opinion on. Arson, candles, cooking, kids playing with matches, and smoking. Those are basically in alphabetical order. But what was interesting is that smoking was thought to be the number one cause of apartment fires. And with that, I think for me, what's kind of interesting, if I look at that, is that if you think that if you believe that people smoke, I would assume that you would also think that there's matches or lighters around, and that if these people smoked, that they would have kids, and possibly those kids would be able to start a fire. Clearly, in my sample survey, the people that answered either felt very strongly that couldn't be, or it was you either smoked or you cooked and played with candles, were really the 3 big sources of possible answers. Here's a picture of what's that, a 4-story brick building. We've got, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 5 different engines trying to put this out. Fire apartment buildings are relatively larger, more dense fuel supply. Can take a lot to put one out. Another question that I asked my survey participants was what they believe the average amount of damage caused in a fire. And I categorize these from in dollar amounts, from 0 to 10,000, 10,000 to 20,000, 20 to 30, 30 to 45, and then greater than 45,000. And the overwhelming percent, again, of people that thought the damage caused by a fire, and I didn't make people add these numbers up and tell me how much in contents and how much in building and how much in loss of rents, etc. I just said perception. What do you think it is? 43%, very consistent with the smokers, believe that the number was in excess of $45,000. And not knowing, I would have guessed. I would have guessed probably. And I think this is kind of one of the things too. I thought. I wonder if the reason why that is if you think of fires, that your reference point is probably more likely to be fires you've seen on the news, fires maybe that you drove by, fires that you heard about where there was a total. And so I would tend to believe that if that's one's reference point, the major fires, you're not thinking about all the smaller little kitchen fires or a little candle fire or something that somebody caught the kitchen on fire. The fire department showed up. They put it out, and $15,000 later, the building's still standing, but the one unit's all messed up, right? So interesting on the perception point there. Question here. This is. I presume she could be a tenant somewhere, but clearly she can make a big flame there. The question I had was, what percentage of renters do you believe come with renter's insurance or have renter's insurance? And again, the percentage breakdown, I went from 0 to 5, 6 to 10, 10 or 11 to 15%, and then more than 15% of tenants. My respondents, I think fairly accurately got the picture on this, was that, and the majority of people surveyed thought that less than 5% of renters carried renter's insurance. In fact, the whole sum, there was only 18% that thought more than 15% of all renters carried renter's insurance. I did check in with the Red Cross and trying to gather information for this presentation, and asked the question, and they flat out said, "Oh, it's nobody is carrying renter's insurance." When they show up at a fire, people are displaced. They don't have any clothes. They don't have any food. They don't have any money. They are with what they have on their backs. And the Red Cross is usually pretty good to help people get a night, possibly a couple of nights, so that people can get oriented and get going. But I thought it was interesting to hear the percentage from the Red Cross, an organization that's routinely at a fire, and their number as an estimate was less than 5%. And that number was also a number expressed by insurance claims adjusters I've dealt with. I didn't have access, could not find any hard numbers, actual numbers, but the perception on that was definitely less than 5%. Perception of average cost cost of a fire to an apartment owner. Here again, if your perception is the big fire you drove by on the way to work, or the one you read about in the paper, in this, I didn't define these costs to, you've got the perception of the loss, and you've also got the perception of the cost to the owner. So I didn't define that for people to figure that out, but presumably if you had a fire and it was a big fire, and whether your limits weren't satisfactory or you your coverage was not properly set up, you could have a fire that exceeded your coverage and cost you some. And whether it be you carry a large deductible or you have an older building that runs into some code reinforcement issues, it's not out of the realm of possibilities to suffer a loss beyond what your insurance provides in excess of $35,000. Here's another picture of apartment building. The thing I noticed in this picture is that you've got snow on the ground. Looks like it could be a morning, and just the fact that fires, if they're happening at night in the winter, that's a rough thing for the tenants and everybody else involved. Here's a question I asked in the survey. What was your perception of the average time required to rebuild? Majority of people, or I guess majority, the largest group in the breakdown. Breakdown went from 0 to 30, 30 to 60, 60 to 90, 90 to 120, or more than 120. Majority of people thought somewhere between 90 and 120 days. And so when you take that into account, if you have a major fire, if you have coverage that is not adequate, that pushes additional costs on the owner, and then you have additional time where you could be missing out on the rent, the additional hassle you've got to deal with if you're caught midstream, or if you had a project that you were planning on doing and you got to attend to this, or you had some expansion, or maybe miss out on an opportunity because your mind's elsewhere. Those are all real things that happen in a fire. Not something you deal with every day. Okay, here's the actual numbers that I found when I went to the Portland Fire and Rescue, and also the National Fire Protection Association. From 2004 to 15, the three most common causes of fire in Portland, Oregon, were cooking, cigarettes, and electrical fires. And had I known this information before I asked my survey participants, I would have put electrical fires in there to see what kind of response I got. Maybe got rid of arson just to see what people thought. And as I sit here and talk about this, one of my more recent apartment fires was the result of an electrical fire, and it wasn't a faulty electrical system, but it was rather a tenant that had an extension cord. Actually, had multiple extension cords, and they had placed some boxes that were full of papers, etc., on top of these cords. And they left, went out to get a coffee, came back, and the room was on fire. And the cause was this electrical, an extension cord, nothing to do with the system of the building, but just the electrical cord. And I never thought of that, but I will tell you this. I think everybody, if you look around, the average usage of electricity has gone up considerably. My son, he's a sixth grader right now, and one of the things that we do every night is he'll ask me a question or two, depending on what I'm in the mood for, about what was going on when I was growing up, about his age. I can remember the microwave oven was a big deal. I mean, we didn't have computers. We had AM, FM radios. We had stereos and that kind of thing. But I look at all of the stuff that's plugged in my house. Just as I'm sitting here doing this presentation, I look around. I've got a computer. I've got a backup drive. I've got a floor lamp. I've got a printer. I've got another lamp. I've got a surge protector. All out of one outlet. And that's not even the devices I've got charging in the other outlet across the room. So clearly the electrical usage has gone way up, and it's gone up so much that we are now getting information from some of our carriers with respects to their results have shown that electrical is a huge issue. In fact, one carrier we work with is now they're looking to see that you replaced your circuit breakers in your panel if they're beyond 40 years of age. And this is not just some kooky thing, but they've actually gone out and I applaud them for their efforts. They went out and interviewed electricians, and it was determined that these things do wear out. And if they wear out and they arc, you have a fire, in an apartment. I mean, depending on where the fuse box is, but if it's or the circuit breaker, if it's near fuel, near a closet, whatever the case may be. Anyway, all it takes is a spark, and you've got a fuel, and you've got a mess. So one of the things I think possibly coming in the future, and I think these kinds of things are always frustrating when they first show up because nobody else is doing them. None of the other companies are looking this way. But if one company does it and they do it successfully and they're able to minimize their claims, the other carriers are going to have to pay attention to this and will no doubt adopt that. So my point to you is, if you have an older electrical system, it's probably not a bad idea to consider on your time and your budget to have a look at your situation and have it updated if possible, rather than find yourself out of date and possibly uninsurable, and nobody wants you, and then those that do want you are ready to collect a king's ransom. So a little note about that. Cooking is definitely a huge part of fires, as we saw in the last slide there. The average actual amount of damage caused from 2004 to 2014 in Portland, there was over 20 million in building damage, over 5 million in contents, mobile property, and other. The total there was just under 26 million in 10 years. So all things considered, 10 years, $26 million, so about 2.6 average per year. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it didn't seem as bad as it could have been. Picture of the Red Cross in action. In the period from 2004 to 14, there were actually 956 fires. So if you take that almost 26 million divided by 956, the average cost of a fire per the Portland Fire and Rescue Department was $27,000. Now, the question I have in this, and I don't have any data that would show otherwise, is how much is that loss of rents expense costing? And so, these numbers are not airtight as much as they're what the numbers I was able to get from the questions I asked. But they did come from the Portland Fire Department. But there was not a line item for loss of revenue, loss of rents, as we would look to in an insurance policy. So I say that not because to discount the Portland numbers, but just a question of I don't know if it includes it. I halfway believe it doesn't, based on the way the information was presented to me. Smoke detectors. Portland provided some data I thought was kind of interesting, and the smoke detectors anymore when you put a rental into rent, having the smoke detector working, also having the tenant acknowledge the fact that it is working, that if battery chirps or whatever, they're to call you, that it's their responsibility, but that you do have a working smoke detector. In the 900 and I forget what was the slide I had, 956 fires in 10 years. There were 675 instances with smoke detectors. 4 had no smoke detector, and of those 675, 568 did not have reported failure. So out of 900 and some, we know that there were 568 that worked. There were 4 that didn't have, but there's some unaccounted for. Curiously enough, in 10 years, there were only 15 fatalities due to fire. And there was a statistic I found, I don't know if it's right here, I think it's coming up, but there's a statistic that I found talking about just the sheer volume of